Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to the Sidereal Insights Astro update for June 3rd, 2019. So every 2 weeks on the broadcast, we explore the astrology of the current planetary transits across the heavens from a Western sidereal perspective. And so we're specifically using the Fagan-Bradley Sidereal Zodiac in this broadcast. And if you need to look up your sidereal sign placements, you can do that online. There's an easy calculator, totally free, at mystickphysick.com/sidereal tools. Enter in your birth information and it'll give you a copy of your birth chart. I'm 𝘱𝘍𝘢. For those of you who are new to the broadcast, I'm 𝘱𝘍𝘢. I'm the astrologer and artist of Mystic Physick Astrology, and I use Western sidereal astrology in my practice to really kind of help you reconnect with your soul purpose and to remember why you came into this life to begin with, right? So really, with this broadcast, the idea is providing guidance on how you can consciously use the energy of the transiting planets to really affect your life in a positive way. So it's really about learning to respond to your transits rather than just react to them as they happen. If you can anticipate them and know how they might play out, you can get a better handle on how you can use that energy with intention, and you can make your transits that much more effective for you, but also somewhat more enjoyable because you're not resisting them. You're going with the flow, right? So thank you for watching. Thanks for joining me on the broadcast. You can feel free to like and share the broadcast, especially if you have a friend you know who might be interested in what we're talking about here today. Feel free to tag them. And you can also follow us on Mystic Physick Astrology on Facebook. And please be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. And on the YouTube channel, you want to click on the bell notification icon so that you'll get notified every time I upload a new video. But thank you for joining us. So today, we're going to be talking about current transits, what's actually going on. We're going to kind of recap how you can be using this and what to expect. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's coming in the second half of the month, in part because I want you to be thinking about it now. We're going to talk about the new moon in sidereal Taurus, and we're also going to talk a little bit about the Mars-Saturn opposition coming up in just a couple of weeks. So to kind of recap where we're at right now. So we have several of the larger outer planets already in retrograde. Jupiter retrograde in Scorpio. We have Saturn and Pluto retrograde in Sagittarius. And so if it feels like you're not making any progress in certain areas of your life, or maybe even moving backwards, that's part of why. Progress is going to be slow in any area ruled by Saturn, Pluto, or Jupiter. Any area of your life ruled by the signs that Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter rule in the natal and in the houses that those planets are transiting right now. So you'll want to be aware of both positions because you're going to be feeling it in both areas most likely. In terms of how you can make positive use of the retrograde. So important thing to keep in mind is that Jupiter retrograde is a second chance. That's an opportunity for a do-over. And so really if you have, so in Scorpio, wherever Scorpio lies in your natal chart, that's where Jupiter is currently transiting, or Sagittarius, because Jupiter rules Sagittarius. You could even look to Pisces because we have a traditional rulership of Pisces. You want to look to those houses, those signs, the houses that they occupy, and kind of assess, where are you at? Are you being presented with an opportunity to make a course correction or to make adjustments or changes that might improve your experience or improve what it is that you are working on in that particular area of life. With Saturn retrograde, this is a little bit different. Saturn retrograde is an opportunity to address an unmet or outstanding commitment. It's an opportunity to meet an obligation that you have not yet met, or to tend to matters that you're responsible for, right? And so with Saturn retrograde, you're really being called to uphold your own personal responsibility and accountability. And you can best use the retrograde to do that. And that way, when Saturn begins to move direct again, you won't have to worry about any consequences of having not met your commitments or obligations. With Pluto retrograde, this is more of an opportunity for kind of deep inner healing and transformation. It's an opportunity for a personal metamorphosis in some way, where you can go inside and examine where you may have some sort of wound or some sort of issue that needs some kind of healing attention, and really give it that healing attention. But it's really about doing inner healing rather than transforming things in your outer life when Pluto is retrograde. And then what I really want to call out, because I want you to be thinking about this as we move further into the month, we have Mercury entering his retrograde shadow June 20th. Now this is for his retrograde in sidereal Cancer and then back into sidereal Gemini. So that we have going on the 20th. And then the very next day, we have Neptune stationing retrograde in sidereal Aquarius on the 21st. And so what I want you to do now, knowing that those are coming, be thinking about your plans, especially for the Mercury retrograde. Break out your Mercury retrograde survival guide. Have a look at what houses Gemini and Cancer are in your natal chart, and have a look at my suggestions for how you can use those Mercury retrogrades in those houses and just kind of ride that retrograde constructively rather than not the alternative, rather than not riding it constructively, right? Because when Mercury's retrograde, there's a very specific way that you can put it to use, and it works in your favor to actually do that. And then finally, currently, eclipses. Eclipse season is upon us. We're within the front end influence of the July 2nd and July 16th eclipses in Gemini and Sagittarius. This particular eclipse series began last July. We're in the third set of eclipses in the Gemini Sagittarius series, and this series is going to culminate in July of 2020. And so for those of us affected, what we are likely to find is that some of us are receiving news right now, or especially near the 1st and 2nd of June, if we're being personally affected by the July eclipses. And this is especially so if you have a planet or point near 15 or 16 degrees of an air or fire sign, okay? So what you'll want to do is be cognizant of that, keep your eye on those dates, and then watch for more news from this series in the coming months that's going to serve to kind of move us further into that process of change, at least those of us who are affected by this series. So you'll want to watch the video, 3 Important Eclipse Essentials You Need to Know, for details just about eclipse season and how to navigate them in general. But also check out the broadcast on July 2019 eclipse season, because that I'm going to give you more detail about these specific eclipses, dates and degrees that you need to keep an eye on. And you can feel free to come back to that video anytime between now and mid-September for a refresher, because we'll continue to feel the effects of these eclipses that late into the year, okay? And so I'll share a link in the video description for those two blog posts with the videos that accompany them, and that way you can have that information at your fingertips when you need it. Right now we have the sun in sidereal Taurus. The sun moved into Taurus on May 15th, right? This is his annual tour of the sign of the bull. So when the sun is in Taurus, our need for security kind of comes to the forefront. It takes precedence. And so we might hesitate to venture outside of established comfort zones when the sun is in Taurus. We're kind of comfort seeking in that sense. That doesn't necessarily benefit us to not be willing to step out of our comfort zone. So do be aware when you're challenged by comfort zones, that being open to the experience of stepping outside of them can bring new things to enjoy into your life. So even if that seems uncomfortable, Taurus is about what we enjoy and what we appreciate, what gives us pleasure and what we desire. And sometimes you can discover new things to appreciate, new things to enjoy, new things that bring you pleasure in new and different ways, if you're willing to let your comfort zones be challenged when the sun is in Taurus. We have Mars in Gemini right now. Mars moved into Gemini on the 8th of May, so last month, right? What's important about this is that in Gemini, ruled by Mercury, we have out of bounds energy factoring in to the Mars and Gemini dynamic. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that and how those energies blend, because we're going to be experiencing that still for the next 2 weeks. And that's an important thing to be aware of, right? So Mars and Gemini, can be kind of restless energy, right? We might be more fidgety, we might be more anxious. You may have a hard time getting your thoughts, your mind to settle down, right? When Mars is in Gemini, or getting even your physical body to settle down. And so if that's the case, consider finding ways that you can kind of channel that restless energy either into physical activity, whether that's like labor, busy work, that sort of thing, or by giving your hands something to do, right, to keep them busy. It's really kind of funny that we have this going on at the same time. I was being chuckled at by an older gentleman a couple weeks ago who wanted to know if I could still talk when I put my hands in my pockets. And I think that's very much an expression of Mars in Gemini. I talk with my hands anyway. Apparently I'm doing it even more so. But yes, remember that Mars is out of bounds, and remember that Mercury is out of bounds too. And so when Mars is out of bounds, when any planet is out of bounds, that planet's best and worst qualities come out in all of us, right? And so really the best thing to do is try to focus on what those best qualities are and how you can embody them as much as possible, because the worst qualities can sometimes cause issues. With Mars specifically, this is a tendency to be more headstrong. It's a tendency to be more driven and to be more ambitious than we might normally be. Tap into those things because they can help you make real progress. Our courage runs higher when Mars is out of bounds. We're much more willing to be brave and to do new and different things when Mars is out of bounds, okay? So try to focus on channeling your Martian drive in those areas, because the flip side is that we can be much more self-centered. We can be much more impulsive. We can be overly aggressive. We can be rash. We can be uncharacteristically violent. So try to actively and consciously choose what direction you're going to channel that energy, to kind of give it focus and direction instead of letting it just express however it bubbles up in the moment, right? Because the alternative is picking fights unprovoked, overreacting angrily over the stupidest little frustrations and irritations, right? So be aware that we're going to have this tendency, all of us, right? And those who have strong Mars in our chart more than others. This is how we're experiencing the coming 2 weeks. So practice forgiving and forgetting. The main thing you want to keep in mind in conjunction with that is that Mercury out of bounds is going to add another dimension, right? So just as much as Mars can have us be rash, Mercury can have us behaving erratically, right? Misunderstandings can come up just as much as we might be tending to courageousness. The nice thing about Mercury out of bounds is that it allows us to tap into a level of out-of-the-box thinking that we might not normally have access to. So while Mercury is out of bounds, these are weeks when we can be really, really innovative, especially if you work in a field that requires a skill for analysis or problem solving or communication. Innovative thinking is something that you're going to be able to tap into, right? Now, on the flip side of Mercury out of bounds, it can be very, very easy to become obsessed with stories. And that could be stories in literature, stories in film, even the stories that we tell about our own lives and our own circumstances, right? We can be prone to misconstruing words and then blowing things out of proportion just because we weren't clear on what someone else was trying to communicate to us. And then with Mars adding to that, making us prone to overreacting aggressively or angrily or seeing rivalry and competition everywhere, it just means that in the next 2 weeks, it's going to be even more important to make the effort to be really fully present in your interactions with other people, right? In your interpersonal relations, you want to make the effort to understand fully what the other person really is trying to communicate to you without projecting your own narrative and without projecting your own motivations, okay? So this is the energy that we have while June opens, in addition to all those retrograde planets slowing things down and potentially creating obstacles and delays, right? So collectively, individually and collectively, we have that, and the influence of the July the July eclipses in Gemini and Sagittarius. And so this is all kind of cumulatively creating this environment in which we're in a state of flux, we're in a state of uncertainty, and we may tend to be much more reactionary and confrontational. So just keep in mind that reactivity, you might be feeling a bit more on edge than you would normally feel, and that could last until mid-June once Mars and Mercury finally return in bounds, okay? This is not a time to force things. That's one thing that I really want to stress, especially right now at the new moon when we might want to be making major initiations. You can, but you don't want to force something. So anywhere that you're experiencing obstacles or slowdowns or uncertainty, take a deep breath, take a step back, slow down, be prepared to meet those situations with an open mind and with a receptive attitude towards other alternative possible solutions or alternative ways forward, right? You don't want to get attached to a particular idea about the way things should be or the way things ought to proceed. And if you do, and then you attempt to impose your will about that, it could be a little bit risky and you may end up being disappointed if you do that. So instead, what I'd like you to do is take the time to observe, take the time to stop and understand clearly what is the current situation, what is the current environment, and then get clear about what you want. And then explore that gap. In that gap between what is and what you want, there's a lesson for you, right? Focus on discovering what that lesson is in the gap between what is and what you want, okay? So we also have the new moon in Taurus tonight. So if you joined me live last night for the new moon in Taurus intention setting, if you missed the live, you can do the same practice this evening right in time with the new moon. So the new moon in Sidereal Taurus, this is really, it's going to incline us to kind of like self-indulgence and just enjoying things, right? Taking time to relax and just do things that bring us pleasure. I wrote in the June overview and short reports, if you haven't read them already, I wrote about decadence possibly being a theme that can be touched off at this new moon, in part because we have some really fun contact going on between Venus and Pluto in Sagittarius, and that you should make plans to relax and enjoy yourself. And so I just want to say, when I say decadence, I mean it in the best sense possible, right? I don't mean decadence in the sense of like decay and debauchery. I mean decadence in the in the way that you might describe a really scrumptious dessert, right? That you just can't get enough of. Something that you can really enjoy and really take pleasure in. I think that's the kind of experience that we can have with this particular new moon. And with retrograde Jupiter in opposition to the new moon, events that take place now could touch off very deep emotional responses in us, right? This is a time when I want you to be very, very clear about your priorities versus the priorities of other important and significant players in your life, okay? And assess whether or how you're meeting each other's needs. And we do talk about that in more depth in the new moon in Taurus intention setting practice. So if you'd like to get into that in more depth, definitely I would say watch the video and do your intention setting. So, but really be thinking about whether in terms of your priorities versus those of other important and significant players in your life, be clear about whether your resources are complementary to each other, right? And be clear about whether your desires are similar, because retrograde Jupiter is going to give you a chance to kind of reestablish equilibrium if there's some sort of imbalance between you. And if not, being clear about what you want really gives you the opportunity to put your priorities first as you choose your direction and move forward into the new moon. So even if there's not some sort of imbalance or lack of equilibrium, you can still take the time to be clear about what your desires are and what it is you want, because being clear about that is going to help you just move forward in a much more distinct direction. And I would encourage you, be sure to check out the video, 3 Important Eclipse Essentials That You Need to Know at the website. I will leave a link in the video description, either above or below, depending on where you're catching the video. The eclipse degree is active at this new moon for some readers, right? And it's important, especially if you're one of those readers, to really be fresh on how to move through eclipse season. There are some risks that you may want to be aware of. One of those is the fact that eclipse time is not a time to be issuing ultimatums, and I get into why in the video. So I will drop a link, and that way, if you need a refresher on that, you can have that. Venus is moving into Taurus the day after the new moon, right? And that's her home sign. She's going to be there for most of the month. And with Venus in Taurus, we find more pleasure in life, right? Venus in Taurus is generally when we want to experience a slower pace. We want to take time to savor and find enjoyment in our activities and take pleasure in things around us. And so use these coming weeks in that way. We've got some stress and some change and some flux coming up as we move into July and have to confront the eclipses. We're getting a little bit of a breather right now at this new moon. And so take that opportunity for what it is before things get kind of hectic next month, okay? And then finally, one last thing that I want to touch on is Mars in opposition to Saturn retrograde, which is going to happen on the 14th, so not quite 2 weeks from now. The reason I want to talk about this is because a Mars-Saturn opposition is really about how we respond to obstacles and delays and limitations, right? And Mars has a tendency to get very, very frustrated because Mars is about our drive, right? And Mars can be easily frustrated when encountering delays and obligations, when the will is thwarted, right? But what I want you to consider, first of all, typically when Mars and Saturn are duking it out, Saturn usually comes out the winner, right? Because Saturn is all about responsibility and commitment and what you're learning from the experience, right? And Mars can have a tendency to be a little bit impulsive, to be a little bit headstrong, and to dive into things without really considering the consequences. And Saturn is all about consequences, right? So keep in mind that while it can be super frustrating when you're not making the progress you want to make, when your will is thwarted, when you're facing delays and obstacles and restrictions, often when you're in that situation, there's something that you stand to gain from the delay, something that may even be in your highest good, even if you can't see it in the moment. And so you can fight it all you want, but you're probably wasting your effort, you're probably wasting your energy. So look for ways that you can be helpful instead, and look for ways to be helpful, even if that means stepping outside of your comfort zone, okay? And that may be where the real benefit is to you, is once you step outside your comfort zone. So be willing to take in those experiences as you step outside your comfort zone, okay? And I guess just a few announcements, really. If you missed me live, like I said, on Sunday, it's still a perfect time to do your new moon in Taurus intention setting practice. Remember, you do have 10 days after the new or full moon for your practice. I will leave a link for that in the video description. Also, be sure to catch the June overview and short reports. It's a little bit lengthy. The overview is this month, in part because there's a lot of things to consider this month that will be actually affecting us next month. But it's just an opportunity to be thinking ahead, maybe planning for how you want to work through some future energy that's coming in July, okay? And then also, please, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and definitely, click on the little bell icon. That way you get your notifications and you won't miss a broadcast. And please follow Mystick Physick Astrology on Facebook as well. Let me see, I think that's pretty well everything. Yeah, that covers all of my announcements. So thank you for joining me. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the comments. I always come back and answer your questions if you have any questions about how you can use the upcoming transits based on the Fagan Bradley Sidereal Zodiac. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you again next time.